Brigade presents The Realty Debate, powered by Reliance Home Finance with Manisha Natarajan.
Welcome everyone to the Realty Debate on NDTV Profit Prime. I'm Manisha Natarajan and today's topic is one that every family must watch. How do property rights in India stack up for women? Do inheritance laws work for women in our country? Do women have any rights on the property of their husband in case of a divorce? Now, international community and policymakers are completely aware of the fact that guaranteeing women's property and inheritance rights must be part of any development agenda. And women's lack of property ownership is one of the most important contributor to women's low social status and also their poverty and the violence that they're subjected to. We are joined today by Pinky Anand, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court, Harsh Rungta, SEBI-registered investment advisor and founder of harshrungta.com, Vinay Singh, founder and owner, Vinay Singh & Associates, and a property expert, and Ravi Ramu, MD and CEO, VBSC. Gentlemen and Pinky Anand, thank you very much for joining me. Let me just put a little bit in perspective on what the current inheritance laws are. Now, let's start with what are property rights. Simply put, property rights include the legal rights to acquire, own, sell and transfer property and collect and keep rents earned from that asset. Inheritance of property in India is governed by personal laws. So, anyone who is not Muslim, Christian or Parsi is governed by Hindu law in India. 80% of India's population is Hindu. So, rights over parental property. Now, in 2005, the Government of India amended its inheritance laws to ensure daughters enjoyed equal rights to inherit their parents' land and property. Even the heirs of predeceased daughters have been included, which means the children of the deceased daughter will have the same right over the property as their mother would if she was alive. The Hindu Succession Act prior to 2005, so this is the 1956 Act, originally did not give daughters inheritance rights in ancestral or parental property. Rights over husband's property. Now, this is a big one. This is straightforward. The female inherits the property of the deceased husband along with her children. But in case of separation or divorce, an Indian woman is only entitled to maintenance from her husband. She has no right on the assets. So if she leaves him or gets divorced, even years after marriage, she is potentially without assets. Indian government policies do not consider the work done at home by the woman as having any economic value. That's all we can make of this. In 2010, the government did step in to change this. Hindu Marriage Laws Amendment Bill 2010 was cleared by the Union Cabinet, also passed by the Rajya Sabha, provided that in case of divorce has been granted on grounds of irretrievable breakdown of marriage, the husband may have to give a court or by the court decided equitable share of his immovable property to the wife and children. This bill, however, was never passed by the Lok Sabha and has now lapsed. Now, what needs to be done? The government has to make or bring this bill back into action. Okay. Historically, Pinky Anand, women's property rights have been under the control of the father or if she is married under the husband. Now, yes, we've had some amendment to the Hindu Act and women can inherit, but in reality that not much has changed, has it?
You're right, actually, Manisha. You've covered the territory rather well. I must say that though the law has really taken big steps and big leaps and bounds by giving women rights, but ultimately due to the cultural, due to the social ethos, due to beliefs, due to traditions, women either will not claim their rights, or if they claim their rights, they really have to go a long way up to fight it out. You have a bias which is there on behalf of the parents, there is a bias from society. So, women who want to have their rights are really considered as not the right thinking people, and therefore there is this entire situation which, despite the laws being there, you have a very small cross section which firstly goes to claim rights, and the ones who do go to claim rights also have to fight a battle all the way up.
All the way up to the court. In fact, there have been books written on it and by very, very famous, in fact, famous journalists whose daughters have written a book on it saying that it was absolutely impossible to get the mother to recognize her right to any ancestral property. Now, what's happening to women's attitude towards inheriting property now? there's been a UN study and it says that women who would like to inherit land are just 11%. Seriously, only 11% women really want to inherit. Parents who would not like to bequeath land to daughters, 42%. Nearly half of Indian parents believe that daughters should not be given land. Brothers who do not wish sisters to inherit land is 51% even today, despite the laws saying that they do have right to all ancestral property. Panchayat officials do not recognize daughters' right to inherit land, 47%. And community does not recognize women's right to inherit land, 45%. Now, I don't even know where to go. Ravi Ramu, what's going on? I mean, despite having legal changes, it's literally like women saying, traditionally, no one expects us to get land or property. And hey, if I ask for it, I'm going to be termed, quote unquote, a bitch. That's the easiest way to put it.
No, I think, Manisha, life is a bitch if you look at it that way. But, let me talk about my own family. I have a sister and there are two brothers, and each one of us got equal shares in our ancestral property, land we are talking about, and buildings. You also have Kerala, where it's a matriarchal society. So the woman actually is the head of the family in terms of financial considerations as well as property and land. So I think, as you have said, it is more an attitudinal mindset thing rather than statute coming in. We have to lead by example. Little bits of changes of attitudes is how it starts, and then it cascades into society thinking otherwise. So there are pockets in the country where this happens, other pockets where it doesn't. And awareness of the law. Manisha, frankly, some of these details which I've just heard from you is news to me. And I think we need to disseminate this information, make women aware, some women are aware, and make the men aware who take these diabolical decisions that, they're not allowed to do so. So I think it's more an awareness issue on the points that you talk about, rather than the statute really being out of place or misplaced.
When I sing, why is this huge hesitance amongst women to claim what is rightfully theirs?
See, Manisha, women have been suppressed all along and made to believe that this doesn't belong to them. Even if it legally belongs to them, it doesn't morally belong to them. Now, in the educated areas and in the metro cities, perhaps things are different. But you step outside the metro and you will realize how bad the situation is. Women do not really have any rights, and they are not allowed to enforce anything that they have. So what is really required is the Marriage Amendment Bill, which proposed to amend the Hindu law as well as the Special Marriage Act, is a must. Now, the Modi government has put it on the back burner last year, and they are afraid that the divorce rate would go up once they have more rights. Perhaps it's true, but that is no reason to deny rights. This is a natural phenomena that once you give rights, there might be some reaction to it. But you will need to bring in legislation. You will need to give women their rights. They would need to, just to give you an example, what happens when a patriarch dies? Usually you end up taking a declaration or an affidavit from the ladies of the house saying that, oh, we don't have any right in the property, and even if we do have, we are sacrificing it. A whole bunch of government agencies has been accepting these documents which are not legally valid. So these are mindsets which are creating all these problems.
Pinky,
so I think clear legislation, even more clear enforcement by the government is required here.
All right, enforcement by the government. Pinky Anand has a dual hat. She's also a spokesperson for the BJP. Why has the government put this on the back burner? I mean, look at it. I'm getting a divorce. I have no rights to the assets of my husband. This has to be in women's right. Forget about reservation in the parliament. This is a basic right of a woman, isn't it? Wouldn't you agree?
No, you're right. I mean, the contribution that a woman makes in the marriage, assuming that she's a homemaker and she doesn't even get any economic gain outside and contributes to the family, but the contribution is by her own work which she puts into the family and the household, there is full justification for equitable and just division of assets. assets which is recognized throughout the world, and it's high time that we did recognize it. I'm afraid sometimes things take time, and it should be expedited.
Do you think after this show you will go back and raise the matter with the government? I mean, progressive, you've got so many changes happening on the economic front, and this economic ownership is really, really important. Now, I'm going to come to Harsh Rungta, but this, I mean, I was stunned when I was doing the research on this topic. Now, a study done in Kerala by Beena Agarwal, a prize-winning development economist and a professor at the University of Manchester, also earlier director at the Institute of Economic Growth, Delhi, established a clear pattern between domestic violence and lack of property ownership. They studied 502 ever married women in the age group of 15 to 49 years in rural and urban areas of Thiruvananthapuram. My God, I always stumble on that one. And this is Kerala, where literacy rates, remember, is the highest in India. They found, or the report found, that the incidence of spousal physical violence was 49% amongst those who own neither land nor a house. And it dropped, look at the number, to only 7% among those who owned both and 10% for those who owned only a house. Harsh Rungta, need I say more?
Absolutely. Manisha, I mean, I think on inheritance, we have had lots of debate already. But just let me add about some other laws. In fact, if you look at the tax laws, for example, one of the reasons why women would typically get property rights, although they may not pay for a property, is because husbands would transfer it to them for tax reasons, to save on cost, to save on tax, etc. Now, in an old era, because the tax rates were very high, the tax laws were written with a view to making this impossible. So today, because of clubbing provisions in the Income Tax Act or the provisions that relate to deduction of home loan interest, etc., that ensures that husbands will not take the property in their wife's name. There was this brief flurry of interest that happened when some of the northern governments, I think Delhi, I think Haryana, they started having lower stamp duty for property that was owned exclusively by women. Right. Unfortunately, it died down because if the husband was funding that property, then the tax laws completely militated against it.
All right.
Today, it does not actually make sense to, I mean, the amount of tax benefit you get simply by shifting the property in the name of your wife is very low. If we change that, whatever little revenue loss is there, that can be treated as a government's contribution to women's empowerment, that itself might lead to some amount of better property ownership, at least among the middle classes.
Are you saying, Harsh Rungta, that this entire policy initiative of the government, which comes in the form of concessions and stamp duty and also rental income being free, isn't really working? So you said that because it has to be, the house has to be funded completely by the woman. If it's not, then they are not eligible for those tax benefits. Is that the basic reason why it's failed?
I would not say that is the my point is that typically to take advantage of the lower stamp duty, which some state governments have announced, the property would have been registered in the name of the woman, even though it's funded by the husband, and that's a good thing. Remember, we want women to have more property, but they are not able to do it because the husband takes the loan. That interest is not deductible if the property is solely owned by the women. The rental can be clubbed in his hands, the capital gains again would be taxed in his hands. So the tax laws completely militate against what is arguably clearly a tax avoidance device, but this tax avoidance is actually leading to property ownership. So I'm saying that allow this tax avoidance.
You're saying that don't come after this tax avoidance. This is actually a good way to ensure that property is more evenly distributed and men actually use their wives to register property. Look at Delhi. I mean, 4% for women, 6% for men. Gurgaon, 6% for women, 8%. And these two states have just the most terrible record of gender equality. I mean, and the worst cases of violence, isn't it? Pinky Anand, in your own experience, this entire Marriage Act amendment, how critical do you think it is? I mean, in the divorce cases which you see in Indian courts, Is it a big struggle today for women to actually get immovable property in their names? Do they all end up with just the maintenance, or mostly end up with the maintenance?
They do, Manisha, because ultimately the law only entitles you to maintenance. The only part of assets that you acquire are what you have a right to live in that residence because of the Domestic Violence Act, which came about in 2005, before which you did not even have that particular provision. So with that kind of law in hand, all you have a right to is to live in that house. You don't have a right to inherit it, you are not secure. And believe me, the correlation between violence and lack of security or lack of ownership of property is a very distinct one. You pointed out some in Kerala, but aside from that, the very fact that you are insecure, you subjugate yourself. The very fact that you are insecure, the insecurity is promoted by the husband and the in-laws. The very fact that you are insecure, I mean, you will be treated even worse than you would be if you had some security. And security leads to confidence, security leads to your going outwards, and security really is a complete chain of transactions which you are omitted from if you don't have that.
Ravi Ramu, are you seeing a change? I mean, you have this entire workforce, young India. Of course, we understand that rural India will take a long time to change its land norms, inheritance norms, but at least in cities, are women getting more aware? I mean, I have a family where my mother and her sisters refuse to actually upset the cart by asking for anything from their brother's property, right? So that's a generation gone. I'm sure by my generation things have changed, but can you see in the portfolio that developers are selling a lot many more women coming up or men buying property in the names of women or joint property purchases? Are you seeing that change?
Yeah, absolutely, Manisha. I think we have spent all the time thus far on this program looking at the past and inheritance. We have not touched upon the biggest plus for women in this country. The earners, the women earners. Once the money comes funded, like you were talking about the 4 and 6% stamp duty difference, 6 to 8%, it is going to be fraught with issues, perhaps violence issues. But here is a clear-cut, large mass of women who are earning for themselves. So what we need is not stamp duty concessions. What we actually need, if we need to see a sea change, is the woman buyer being encouraged to buy her first home. You think the first time woman buyer is a huge segment to which this country hasn't actually applied its thought, both in terms of tax, procedure, as well as the builders giving a product to women alone. I don't mean a product at the end, but the product at the beginning, the source of acquiring a property, the means is very difficult for a working woman because she has to deal with mostly a system dominated and punctured by men. So it's very difficult for this home buyer, home aspirant who also has a job, who's got a full-time job, to get into this whole system of acquiring a property. So what we perhaps could do with is municipalities with a section which has only women staff dealing with approvals for women. Builders who would have women dealing, perhaps going to their homes in the evenings and providing the opportunities, both in terms of home loans as well as products. Because, a lot of this segment lives alone. So we have got to make the ecosystem for the woman who has the means to be able to acquire the property. And therein lies the whole panacea to this issue. Inheritance, I think, is an issue which just has to get rubbed off with time and attitude. Solving this in India is going to be a huge task, but let's start with the urban Indian single woman who wants to be a first-time home buyer.
Well, we have an entire advertising series, beautiful ad where a woman says, all that I want is a first home. I mean, that ad actually advertising did very, very well. So it's definitely resonating with the younger women. Vinay Singh, how much of a change do you see? In a time of slow sales, banks definitely have a very, very small discount for women buyers, but I don't see developers doing anything exciting or making it more accessible for women to buy homes. Are you?
No, there has really not been much thought applied by anybody actually onto this segment, and I mean it's still focused on the family as such. Also, I think that honestly, the law as such needs to be looked at differently. Like in Goa, we have community property laws. That is something that we need to look at across the country. Once you have community property laws and women become entitled to half the property in a marriage, I think that should bring about a sea change, and that will affect everything. It will affect the way a builder looks at things. It will affect the way the entire society looks at things. So I would think that a change in the law is very much required on the. It should be done, looked at really seriously.
Okay. Now, if I even look at the home loan figures, Harsh Rungta, over the last year, I believe the demand for home loans has increased from 15% to 29%. Of this, 5% of the borrowers were single working women. I need to look at the data a little bit more closely. This seems to be a little bit, broad sort of a data, but the sense I get is that 5% of the borrowers were single working women. What about married working women? I mean, that's where I believe, or a non-working women, that's where a big change is needed, isn't it?
I think, Manisha, if the data is correct, I mean 5% single women are the percentage, if it's 5% of the home loan borrowers, that's a great and a very encouraging number. Please remember, just a couple of years ago that number would be a rounding off number. So I think 5% of a growing market is a pretty good number. The other thing, as Ravi said, let's look at, inheritance laws or other things are big things. There are lots of political discussions around them. It's not going to be an easy thing to do. But what is already happening, women are already earning money. They are entitled to take home loans, maybe certain or entitled to buy property. Maybe they just certainly feel socially, they might feel a little, apprehensive about buying property in their own name. I think some kind of marketing, and in the days when marketing real estate is a clear need, I think what is being suggested, that there be specific products towards women should be there. The other thing that you mentioned, married earning women, I think that's already a trend. Most home loans today, I don't have the data, but most home loans today where the couple is working, typically would be jointly owned and jointly taken loans. So I think that has already happened. I think the discussion is around single women and not earning married women.
Married women. I think that's the biggest class which is missing, and because we don't have digital records, so I couldn't find at least any data to see if there's been a clear increase in the number of registrations where either it's joint or at least it's more women. But Pinky Anand, coming back to this big change which is needed in the Hindu marriage law, which essentially entitles women, even if they haven't been working women, to have claim over their husband's property during a divorce. Is there any truth to the naysayers who say this will increase the divorce rate? I mean, that's something which comes up again and time and again, or is this?
Of course, Manisha, it's always possible, because once you give certain rights, you will find people claiming those rights. When you claim those rights, you're going to have disputes arising because you want to claim those rights. So those kind of vicious circles also do start, particularly if women believe that on a divorce they would get an equitable distribution in property. Right now they don't. So for them to walk out of a marriage, A, is not practical. Secondly, morally or socially, it is not advisable. And thirdly, because of tradition, etc. So the only way that women would possibly think of moving out is if they felt that they could get an equitable distribution in property. But having said that, Manisha, I must just come back to one of the other subjects that Harsh was speaking about. To the extent of what the laws will do or have done. It is very well known that either society brings about a change in law or change in law brings about a change in society. So I think this time the ball has rolled with the Hindu Succession Act. The law has been changed very well. Right now the figures are low, but I am very hopeful that as and when the law gets imbibed, whether by education or whether by teaching people or whether by change of norm or ethos, you will find people coming forth. And that will change society to a dramatic extent. And just lastly, on the aspect of what kind of benefits. So even the stamp duty benefits was a big thing
It
for
is a
women
big
to
thing.
come
I would
forth.
agree.
There
Absolutely.
was a DDA policy, I remember several years back, which compelled any property to be registered not only in the name of the husband but also the wife.
Joint.
Now that did change things a lot. So these compulsive processes, or let us say where you even turn a blind eye to certain distortions in the system where you're having single working women, but I don't see married working women actually going for single ownerships. That would
Right.
be joint ownerships, home loans, because of those benefits that they get in taxation. So here you have the entire scenario. You are having a change in society. You are having single working women. You are having married women. I would really exclude in that category because I don't see them going singly. So you are having this entire portfolio which is interesting, and definitely a change in laws which are more submissive to women's rights, or which really promote it, I think would be very good thing to do.
Absolutely, and I think I'm going to thank everybody here. It's been a very interesting discussion. But you know, one of the real estate developers was telling me that with that extra interest rebate that you get now on loans which are below 50 lakhs, I think forget everything else. Just give your daughter a flat and a home. Harshungta, yes or no? At marriage, why not start with?
I think in the developer world, a flat made for women is a flat that's painted pink. I think that's not really a women's flat. I think we need little more work, and I suspect that will be designed by women. For a male, even a progressive male to design a product is rather difficult, because I think any product like that needs to be designed by the women users themselves, and I think that's where we should look at. Even among developers now, the women are taking center stage. I'm sure some of them will come up with a product that's much better design than just appeal to somebody to take advantage of a small tax rebate.
I think Harsh Rungta's comment is one of the most progressive comments. We need more Harsh Rungtas around.
When I think you're in a pink tie and a pink, I can see a little pocket chief there. So tell me, I mean, finally, big change waiting to happen with more women working. I think just the fact that more and more women are joining the workforce, give it another 5 years and things are likely to change dramatically, isn't it?
Yes, see, because as they are earning, we also need to help them with a push to the law. So things will change, yes, as they become aware of their rights, but in the first place they should have those rights, which is why we are saying that it's very important to change the law and educate them both.
All right. So Pinky Anand, we are all depending on you to take back the word to the party and tell them, please don't put this on the back burner. And this amendment is really needed to give all those women who do add huge amount of economic value through being homemakers, and they also are entitled to property, equal rights to property that their husbands own. Pinky Anand and Ravi Ramu, Harsh Rungta and Vinay Singh, thanks very much for joining me today. On the other side, a taxing issue, service tax and value-added tax that you're charged on your flat or apartment purchases has become a huge headache, with policy flip-flops and courts interpreting these rules every now and then in a different way. We'll come back to clarify the lawful positions on these taxes and whether you are liable to pay them or not.